The sirens cut through the coastal fog just before dawn, echoing off glass towers and quiet cul-de-sacs. Red and blue lights washed over the marble steps of the Orange County Civic Center as federal agents moved with practiced urgency. Inside, a single office light burned on, stubborn and defiant, as if daring the night to come closer. On the desk sat a leather briefcase, unlatched. Inside were bank slips, burner phones, and a ledger that didn't belong to any public office. The ledger told a story of money moving too fast, too cleanly, and always at the worst possible moments. Pandemic relief funds, emergency allocations, children's health grants, all siphoned into a maze of shell companies with names designed to suit the public and confuse the auditors. By sunrise, the headline would be everywhere: a sitting politician under investigation for pandemic bribery. But in that office, as agents photographed every inch and sealed the room, the most chilling realization settled in. The money was already gone. The investigation had begun months earlier, in the chaos of lockdowns and daily death counts. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Food banks stretched thin. The public demanded answers and aid, fast. That urgency became the perfect cover. Councilman Evan Calder, a rising star with a polished smile and a talent for appearing compassionate on camera, had positioned himself at the center of relief distribution. He spoke of transparency, accountability, and unity. He chaired emergency committees, signed off on contracts, and appeared at press conferences flanked by nurses and small business owners. Behind the scenes, Calder was building something else entirely. The first crack appeared when a junior accountant in the county finance department noticed duplicate invoices. Same services, same dates, different vendors. It was subtle, easy to miss amid the flood of emergency spending, but the numbers gnawed at her. She flagged them. The flag disappeared. Weeks later, another anomaly surfaced. A nonprofit awarded a sizable relief grant had no physical office, no staff beyond a single registered agent, and a website that looked assembled overnight. Still, the checks cleared. Still, the approvals bore Calder's signature. Federal investigator Lena Morales took the call on a gray afternoon, her office cluttered with case files that all looked the same lately. Panic-fueled frauds feeding on desperation. She expected another small-time grift. What she found instead was a pattern that climbed straight to the top. Morales and her team mapped the money. Relief funds flowed from county accounts to nonprofits with benevolent names, then bounced through consulting firms, then vanished offshore, or reappeared as loans to real estate ventures and luxury purchases. A beachfront condo, a classic car restored during lockdown, tuition payments routed through a trust. Every path circled back to Calder, but proving intent in a storm of emergency approvals was a different beast. Calder's defenders said mistakes were inevitable during crisis spending. His allies warned investigators to tread carefully. The pressure mounted as election season crept closer. Then came the bribe. A contractor named Marcus Hale, whose company had ballooned overnight with pandemic contracts, was pulled over for a routine traffic stop that turned into something else. In the trunk, cash, neatly bundled, far exceeding what any contractor needed for expenses. When questioned, Hale broke faster than expected. He spoke of meetings in parking garages, of envelopes exchanged for approvals, of a promise that if he played along, everyone would come out clean. He named Calder. Morales authorized surveillance. Phones lit up with coded messages. Meetings happened in plain sight, masked and distanced, like everyone else. Except the stakes were different. One message stood out, sent after midnight. It's time to settle the balance. Same place. Agents moved in. The handoff never happened. Hale vanished. His phone went dark. His company's offices were emptied overnight, computers wiped, files shredded. Calder went on television the next morning, condemning corruption and promising cooperation. Behind closed doors, the ledger surfaced. It wasn't just numbers. It was intent, notes in the margins, initials, dates tied to press conferences and committee votes. As agents sealed the office and the fog lifted, Morales stood back and looked at the Civic Center waking up. Joggers passed. Coffee shops opened. The machinery of normal life resumed, unaware that the ground beneath it has shifted. Because the ledger had one final page. A list of names. Some crossed out, some circled, and at the bottom, a phrase written in tight, deliberate script, Phase 2. But when investigators traced the final transfer connected to that page, it led to an account that didn't exist anymore. Closed, emptied, erased. And that was when Morales realized this wasn't the end of a scheme. It was the beginning of a cover-up that reached far beyond one office, one politician, or one stolen check. The disappearances by the time the sun set on Orange County, the ledger had already changed the investigation's gravity. What began as suspected mismanagement had hardened into something far more dangerous, an organized extraction of public money, executed under the cover of a once-in-a-century emergency. And now, people were vanishing. The first to disappear was Marcus Hale. Federal agents traced his last confirmed sighting to a gas station off the Pacific Coast Highway. Security footage showed him buying water and protein bars, his eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. He paid cash. He didn't use his phone. He walked back to a rented sedan that wasn't in his name. 30 minutes later, the car crossed a toll point heading south. After that, nothing. Hale's silence was deafening. He had been cooperative, eager, even, to trade information for leniency. His sudden disappearance suggested fear, or something worse. Morales ordered a protective detail retroactively, a bureaucratic irony that sat heavy in her chest. The protection came too late. As agents expanded their search, Calder's world tightened. Donors stopped returning calls. Staffers quietly cleared desks. A scheduled town hall was canceled with no explanation. On camera, Calder maintained a calm, wounded demeanor. Off camera, his attorney demanded access to evidence and accused investigators of targeting an elected official during a crisis. Behind the scenes, Calder's finances began to unravel. A forensic audit uncovered a latticework of trusts and limited partnerships, some registered overseas, others buried within domestic holding companies. The condo purchase was only the tip. There were luxury watches bought through intermediaries, private school tuition paid via scholarship funds, and a consulting contract that paid six figures for services no one could describe. Each discovery raised a more unsettling question. Who else knew? Morales assembled a task force that included federal prosecutors, financial crime specialists, and an internal affairs liaison from a neighboring county, far enough removed to avoid conflicts. They worked out of a windowless room, walls covered with timelines and arrows that crisscrossed like a city map. Names appeared and disappeared as evidence firmed up or fell apart. One name refused to go away: Dr. Elaine Porter. Porter ran a respected nonprofit that had received emergency nutrition grants early in the pandemic. Her organization had distributed meals when schools closed, earning glowing press and heartfelt testimonials. On paper, her nonprofit looked legitimate. In practice, it had become a conduit. Bank records showed Porter's nonprofit received funds, retained a fraction, then paid consulting fees to a firm tied to Calder's network. Porter insisted she'd been misled, that she trusted the county approvals and assumed the consultants were mandatory. Her story held until investigators found emails. The emails revealed pressure, subtle at first, then explicit. Approvals delayed, funds held up, a suggestion that cooperation would keep the kids fed. Porter broke down during questioning, her voice shaking as she admitted she felt trapped. She named meetings. She named dates. She also named a second ledger. According to Porter, Calder kept redundant records, one sanitized for auditors, one private. The private ledger was rumored to be stored off-site, somewhere safe. Morales felt the case pivot again. The original ledger was damning. A second could be catastrophic. That night, an anonymous tip came in. A voice distorted by software gave an address: an industrial storage facility near the county line. The caller said only one thing before hanging up: "He's cleaning house." Agents moved fast. The storage unit was locked, paid in cash under a shell company. Inside, they found boxes of documents, old phones, and a hard drive labeled with a date from the height of lockdowns. As technicians began imaging the drive, a fire alarm shrieked through the facility. Sprinklers erupted. Water poured down in sheets. In the confusion, someone cut the power. When the lights came back on, 2 boxes were missing. The hard drive survived. Its contents painted a picture darker than Morales expected. There were spreadsheets detailing payouts, not just to contractors, but to intermediaries, fixers who smoothed approvals, quieted complaints, and redirected scrutiny. There were audio files too, conversations recorded without consent, voices discussing keeping the pipeline open and managing the narrative. One voice sounded unmistakably like Calder. Another belonged to someone Morales hadn't expected, a senior county official who had publicly championed ethics reform. As warrants went out, resistance followed. Motions to suppress evidence. Claims of unlawful surveillance. A sudden leak to the press framed the investigation as overreach, a political witch hunt during recovery. Online, the public split into camps. Some demanded accountability. Others saw persecution. Then came the warning. Morales returned to her car after a 14-hour day to find a note tucked under the wiper. No signature. Just 3 words, written neatly. Back off now. She didn't. Instead, she authorized the arrest of Calder's chief of staff on obstruction charges after phone records placed him near the storage facility the night of the fire alarm. The arrest triggered a cascade. Phones rang off the hook. Lawyers crowded hallways. And somewhere in the noise, Hale's name surfaced again. A body hadn't been found, but a passport scan hit a border checkpoint overseas. Marcus Hale, using an alias, hours before the task force raided the storage unit. Someone had tipped him off. As Morales stood before the board, staring at the web of connections now sprawling across the wall, one truth settled in with chilling clarity. The scandal wasn't just about stolen money. It was about control, who wielded it in a crisis, and how far they would go to keep it. And if Hale was alive, running, and carrying secrets worth killing for, then the most dangerous chapter of the investigation was still ahead. The cost of silence. The arrest warrant for Daniel Calder was signed just after dawn. By then, the story had outgrown Orange County. National outlets parked satellite trucks outside the courthouse. Headlines spoke of betrayal during a pandemic, of public trust sold for private gain. Calder's face, once a symbol of calm leadership in televised briefings, now stared back from screens with a harder edge, jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. But Calder wasn't home when agents arrived. His security system showed a clean exit hours earlier. No struggle, no panic, just a man who knew the clock had run out and chose to move first. His phone was left behind on the kitchen counter, powered off. His passport, according to records, hadn't been used. If Calder was running, he was doing it carefully. Morales felt the pressure mount. The public wanted closure. Prosecutors wanted a body in a courtroom. And somewhere between those demands was the truth, fragile, incomplete, and still at risk. The break came from an unlikely place. A junior analyst flagged an anomaly in shipping records tied to one of Calder's shell companies. During the height of the pandemic, when supply chains were strained and oversight was thin, the company had moved medical equipment through a private airstrip outside the county. The shipments stopped abruptly 3 weeks ago. Morales followed the trail. The airstrip led to a decommissioned hangar, leased under a trust that traced back, inevitably, to Calder's network. Inside, agents found makeshift living quarters and a laptop still warm to the touch. On the screen was a paused video file. The title froze Morales in place. Statement. The video was Calder's manifesto. He spoke calmly, deliberately, as if addressing a boardroom rather than the world. He framed his actions as necessary, a response to a broken system that rewarded speed over scrutiny and optics over outcomes. He claimed the money kept programs running when bureaucracy failed. He admitted to taking payments, but cast them as compensation for risk and decisive leadership. Then the tone shifted. Calder named names. Officials, donors, consultants, people who had publicly denounced corruption while privately enabling it. He spoke of threats, of leverage, of a machine that demanded loyalty and punished dissent. He insisted he wasn't the architect, just a cog that refused to be crushed quietly. The final minutes were chilling. If you're watching this, Calder said, it means the story has been simplified. Heroes and villains. That's how it always goes. But remember this, no one steals $250 million alone. The video cut to black. Hours later, Marcus Hale was found. He hadn't made it overseas after all. His body was discovered in a remote stretch of desert, the elements already erasing details investigators desperately wanted to preserve. There were no signs of a struggle nearby, just a shallow grave and a burner phone crushed beneath a rock. On the phone was one unsent message, addressed to no one. They're not done. The implication was impossible to ignore. Calder surrendered 2 days later at a private residence owned by a family friend. He didn't resist. Cameras captured him walking out with his hands visible, expression composed. In court, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. The trial that followed became a spectacle. Prosecutors laid out the financial web, the ledgers, the recordings, the vanished witness. Defense attorneys countered with arguments about emergency powers, rushed regulations, and scapegoating. They questioned the integrity of the investigation, the motives of cooperators, the reliability of evidence recovered amid chaos. Jurors watched the manifesto video in silence. When the verdict came, it was decisive. Guilty on multiple counts: bribery, wire fraud, obstruction. The sentence was severe, though it could never fully measure the damage done. Calder was led away, another fallen official in a long line of cautionary tales. The public exhaled. For a moment, it felt like an ending. But Morales didn't feel relief. She felt unease. In the weeks after the trial, quiet resignations rippled through county offices. Investigations were announced, then narrowed. Names from Calder's video appeared in headlines briefly, then faded. The second ledger, never recovered, remained a ghost, referenced but unseen. Late one evening, Morales received a package with no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note. "You stopped one leak," it read. "The pipeline is still open." The drive contained fragments, partial spreadsheets, clipped audio, dates without context. Enough to suggest Calder hadn't been exaggerating. Enough to confirm that the money trail extended further than anyone had admitted. Morales stared at the evidence, knowing what it meant. Another investigation. Another fight. Another storm of resistance. Outside her office, the building was quiet. Clean. Orderly. Just like the system Calder said was broken. They had caught the man at the center of the scandal. They had named the crime. They had delivered a verdict the public could understand. But the truth, the whole truth, was still out there, scattered, waiting for someone brave or reckless enough to chase it. And as Morales powered down her computer, one thought refused to leave her mind. If a crisis could turn public service into profit once, what would stop it from happening again? If this story pulled you in, the next one might keep you up at night. Don't look away. Stay subscribed.